You were not fooled because you are stupid. That lie is comforting, but it is wrong. You were fooled because you trusted before verifying, because you listened to words instead of tracking behavior, because you wanted the story to be true more than you wanted it to be accurate. That is how most damage begins. Not with evil villains, but with calm voices, steady eye contact, and sentences that sound reasonable enough to relax your guard. Think about the boss who told you, "Just be patient, your time is coming," while quietly moving your name off the list. Think about the friend who said, "I've got your back," then disappeared the moment things became inconvenient. Think about the partner who spoke about honesty and loyalty, yet somehow their actions were always one step behind their promises. Lies rarely arrive loud or aggressive. They arrive organized, confident, and polite. They feel safe. That is why they work. The real danger is not the lie itself, but the speed at which you accept it. You feel the mismatch for a split second, the pause that lasts too long, the answer that circles instead of landing, the smile that shows up a moment late. And then you override it. You tell yourself not to be paranoid. You tell yourself not to be rude. You tell yourself you are imagining things. That self-correction is where deception locks in. Most people do not lose money, relationships, or years of their life because liars are smarter. They lose because they move too fast and stop watching. Most people don't lose because of lies. They lose because they never slow down long enough to notice them. Once you see that, the problem stops being about catching liars and starts being about reclaiming awareness. Because awareness is colder than hope, sharper than trust, and far less expensive than regret that arrives after the damage is already done. You were taught to be polite long before you were taught to be perceptive. From a young age, you learned not to accuse, not to assume, not to make things awkward. You learned to smile, nod, and give people the benefit of the doubt, because questioning too much was labeled rude, negative, or paranoid. That training feels moral, but it quietly disarms you. Most lies do not survive intelligence. They survive manners. A liar does not need you to be foolish. They only need you to be well-behaved. Think about how often you swallow a strange answer because you do not want to push. Think about the meeting where something felt off, yet you stayed silent because you did not want to sound difficult. Think about the conversation where your gut tightened, but you softened your tone and moved on. That pause was not confusion. It was information. The modern lie is built to exploit your social programming. It hides behind friendliness, professionalism, and emotional comfort. A manager can mislead you with a calm tone. A partner can deceive you while sounding sincere. A salesperson can exaggerate while maintaining eye contact and confidence. None of this works if you slow down and observe. But politeness keeps you moving. You are trained to listen for reassurance instead of consistency. You focus on how something sounds, not how it holds together. Liars understand this instinctively. They rely on your reluctance to interrupt, your fear of appearing distrustful, your desire to keep the interaction smooth. This is why lies often collapse only after consequences appear. By then, the cost is already paid. The shift is not about becoming aggressive or cynical. It is about redirecting attention back to yourself. When something feels unclear, you stay with it. When an answer drifts, you notice. When behavior contradicts words, you stop excusing it. Lies survive on good manners, but clarity does not require cruelty. It only requires that you value accuracy more than comfort, because respect without awareness is not kindness. It is vulnerability wearing a polite mask. and vulnerability always attracts exploitation eventually. Machiavelli was never interested in teaching people how to lie. That misunderstanding is comfortable because it lets people dismiss him. What he actually studied was motive. He watched how people behave when power, fear, reward, or loss enters the room. Through that lens, deception becomes simple to understand. Truth is recalled. Lies are constructed. Someone telling the truth is remembering something that already happened. Their mind moves backward, pulling details from real experience. Someone who is lying is moving forward, building a stage in real time. They are choosing words, adjusting tone, and monitoring your reaction while performing a version of events that never existed. This difference changes everything if you know where to look. Honest people are anchored to memory. Liars are anchored to strategy. One is retrieving, the other is managing. That is why liars struggle under pressure, and lose consistency, and rely on presentation. They are not recalling facts. They are maintaining control. Machiavelli understood that most people fail to see this because they listen emotionally. They respond as friends, partners, or colleagues, absorbing tone and intention instead of structure. A strategist listens differently. A strategist watches timing, sequence, certainty, and alignment between words and behavior. This does not make you cold. It makes you precise. You stop reacting to sincerity and start observing patterns. Once you adopt this lens, lying stops feeling mysterious or intimidating. It becomes mechanical, predictable, almost boring. And that shift is critical, because if you want to catch lies, stop listening like a friend. Start observing like a strategist. Make comment, "I've been too polite." Notice how this approach protects your time, your money, and your dignity. Because seeing motives early prevents explanations later, avoids public embarrassment, and keeps you from negotiating with illusions that were never real to begin with at all times. This is the core of this video. Not theory, not warnings, but practical awareness you can use immediately. What follows is how to slow conversations down, pressure lies gently, and see patterns before damage happens. These steps are not about accusing anyone or becoming paranoid. They are about protecting your time, money, and trust. Each step builds on the last, turning confusion into clarity and instinct into skill. So you stop guessing and start noticing when it matters most today. Step 1 is where most people accidentally make lying easy, simply by asking the wrong kind of question. The most common mistake is the yes or no question. Did you go out last night? Did you talk to them? Did you finish the project? These questions feel direct, but they hand control to the person answering. A liar only needs one word to escape. Yes or no ends the moment before it ever starts. Question framing works differently. Instead of asking whether something happened, you frame the question as if it already did, and let the other person explain it. This forces the brain to choose between recalling reality or constructing a story. In dating, this sounds like asking what made you stay out so late, instead of asking if they went out. Someone telling the truth will naturally explain the situation. Someone lying must invent context, timing, and emotion on the spot, and invention always leaks. In the workplace, notice the difference between did you talk to the client and what came up when you spoke with the client. One invites denial, the other demands substance. If the story drifts, over-explains, or feels padded, you learn more in seconds than months of polite trust. Even in friendships, framing matters. Asking did you hear back from them gives an easy exit. Asking what did they say when you heard back removes it. This is not confrontation. It is structure. You are not accusing. You are observing how someone handles pressure without announcing it. Honest people barely notice the shift because they are anchored to memory. Liars feel it immediately because they are anchored to performance. Their tone tightens. Their pace breaks. They search for time. That reaction is the signal. This is why lies love yes or no questions. Those questions protect them. Framed questions quietly expose them because reality does not need shortcuts, but deception always does. Over time, this habit changes how people speak to you. Some become clearer. Some become uneasy. Both responses are information. And information, gathered calmly, protects your time, your trust, and your future before consequences arrive and force lessons you could have learned earlier. Step 2 is about slowing down enough to notice what happens before a person has time to perform. The first 5 seconds after a question are not magical, they are biological. In that window, the body reacts before the story's built. Muscles tighten, breathing shifts, eyes move differently. Not because someone is evil, but because thinking and fabricating require effort. This is where most people miss lies. They hear the answer and forget to watch the transition into it. You are not looking for one signal. One pause means nothing. One glance away means nothing. What matters is a cluster of small changes appearing together. Think about a coworker who normally speaks smoothly, then suddenly hesitates, swallows, and slows down when you ask about a deadline. Think about a partner who usually maintains eye contact, then looks away, touches their face, and fills silence with extra words when asked a simple question. None of these signs alone prove anything. Together, they tell you the brain is scrambling. The key is comparison, not judgment. You are not deciding if someone is lying. You are noticing when they stop being natural. Truth does not require rehearsal. It moves at its own pace. Lies need time to assemble. That is why the first 5 seconds matter. After that, most people regain control, smooth their voice, and settle into a story. But the leak already happened. Most damage occurs because people ignore that moment and accept the polished version that follows. You have felt this before. That strange pause, that slight delay that did not match the simplicity of the question. You told yourself it was nothing. You chose comfort over clarity. Step 2 teaches you to stay with that discomfort just a second longer, not to accuse, not to confront, just to observe, because the truth leaks before the lie is ready. Comment: that pause always felt strange. Picture a sales call where confidence suddenly dips, or a friend explaining plans who suddenly overcorrects details. These moments are quiet alarms. They do not shout. They whisper. Awareness means listening without reacting, collecting signals instead of conclusions, and letting patterns speak for themselves while you remain calm, grounded, and in control. This step connects naturally to what comes next, because once you notice the leak, the next question becomes how consistent the story stays when time passes and pressure increases over longer conversations. Step 3 focuses on consistency, not confrontation. And this is where time quietly works against a lie. Time shift questioning means asking about the same event at different moments and in different forms, without signaling suspicion. Someone telling the truth is anchored to memory. They remember what happened. Someone lying is anchored to aversion. They remember how they said it. That difference grows obvious over time. Imagine a coworker explaining why a project was delayed. In the meeting, they say the client changed requirements. Later that day, you casually ask what part of the brief caused the delay. Tomorrow, You ask how the timeline shifted after feedback. A truthful person stays aligned because they are recalling real events. A liar must constantly adjust because they are protecting a story, not remembering reality. Small details drift. Order changes. Confidence drops. The story becomes polished in one telling and vague in another. The same pattern shows up in dating. Someone tells you where they were last weekend. Days later, you reference the same night from a different angle. Weeks later, the explanation subtly shifts, not dramatically, just enough to feel off. Friends do this too, especially when avoiding responsibility. The power of time shift questioning is that it removes pressure. You are not interrogating. You are letting memory do the work. Truth does not mind repetition. It does not fear revisiting. Lies do, because each retelling increases cognitive load. This is why liars often sound rehearsed early, then inconsistent later. They are remembering lines, not events. This approach protects you because it replaces emotional reactions with pattern recognition. You stop relying on gut feelings alone and start noticing structure. One inconsistency means little. A pattern means everything. That is why patience matters here. You are not catching someone in a moment. You are observing how reality holds its shape over time. Truth remembers events. Lies remember lines. Once you see that distinction, confusion fades. You stop arguing. You stop explaining. You simply watch whether the story can survive time without collapsing under its own weight, because time is neutral. But lies are fragile when revisited calmly and repeatedly. Step 4 is about listening past confidence and hearing where fear hides inside language. You are not memorizing vocabulary or playing word police. You are noticing when someone avoids ownership. Words like maybe, I think, and probably are not harmless fillers when they appear around important claims. They create distance between the speaker and responsibility. Think about a boss saying, "I think we might move you up soon. Probably next quarter." It sounds supportive, but nothing is owned. There is no commitment to challenge later. In relationships, a partner says, "Maybe I was busy. I think you misunderstood. Probably it was nothing." The story stays soft, so accountability never lands. In sales, you hear probably the best option. Maybe the results will improve. I think this should work. These phrases give escape routes. They lower risk for the speaker and raise risk for you. Honest uncertainty exists, but it shows up evenly. Fear-driven language clusters around pressure points. Pay attention to when clarity suddenly disappears. When stakes rise, words blur. That is not coincidence. That is protection. You are not accusing anyone of lying. You are noticing reluctance to stand behind statements. Clear intentions use clear language. Unclear intentions hide behind cushions. This is why smooth talkers feel convincing until results arrive. The language was never solid enough to hold weight. Most people miss this because they focus on tone. Warm voices feel safe. Calm delivery feels trustworthy. But fear leaks through structure, not volume. Listen for how often someone leaves themselves room to retreat. Listen for how often commitments dissolve into possibilities. Over time, this pattern explains broken promises without arguments. You stop asking why things never happen and start seeing how they were never truly promised. Unclear words protect unclear intentions. Comment, "I hear this every day." This awareness matters in everyday life because money, trust, and time are usually lost through vague language, not open betrayal. When outcomes fail, people blame bad luck. Yet the warning signs were spoken softly all along, wrapped in comfort and hesitation. waiting to be heard by someone willing to listen closely before consequences harden and explanations arrive far too late after trust quietly collapses in public. This awareness leads directly into the next step, where avoidance turns into escape and language shifts into distraction, under revealing what people do when clarity threatens their control and pressure starts quietly rising inside conversations. Step 5 is about noticing escape behavior. The moment a conversation quietly tries to end itself when pressure rises. This is not about catching someone changing the subject once. It is about recognizing a psychological exit. When control starts slipping, people look for a way out that feels socially acceptable. They suddenly switch topics, inject humor, or pull emotion into the room. You ask a clear question and get a joke. You bring up a concern and they bring up a story. You point at facts and they pull sympathy. This happens everywhere. A manager laughs and says, "Let's not get into that right now," when timelines get uncomfortable. A partner deflects with affection when a contradiction appears. A friend changes the subject to drama when accountability approaches. None of this is random. It is avoidance disguised as smooth conversation. Most people miss it because they follow the exit. They laugh back, they comfort, they let the moment pass. That is where leverage is lost. The response is not confrontation. You do not accuse or escalate. You simply bring the conversation back. Calmly, slowly. You acknowledge the detour, then return to the original point without emotion. We can talk about that later, but help me understand this first. That single move reveals everything. Honest people come back willingly. Liars feel exposed because the escape failed. You will see tension rise, pacing change, or defensiveness appear. That reaction is information. Escape behavior only appears when something needs protection. People change topics when control slips. Once you see this, conversations feel different. You stop chasing side roads. You stop rewarding avoidance. You stay grounded while others reveal where they cannot stand still. This step connects naturally forward, because when exits fail, the next response is overload, and pressure shifts from avoidance to collapse under interruption, which is exactly what the next step teaches you to observe when stories can no longer run. This matters because unchecked exits train people that avoidance works, reinforcing behavior over time and deepening deception. When you calmly refuse exits, you reset the dynamic without aggression or drama. You become steady while others reveal instability. This is how clarity accumulates quietly, interaction by interaction, until patterns become undeniable evidence rather than emotional guesses. That awareness prepares you for the next pressure point, where interruption exposes collapsing narratives and forces truth to surface, without confrontation or unnecessary emotional damage. Step 6 explains what happens when a fake story is forced to multitask under pressure. This is not about rudely interrupting someone or trying to catch them off guard. It is about cognitive overload. A fabricated story needs order to survive. It depends on sequence, timing, and uninterrupted focus to sound believable. The person telling it is juggling memory, reaction, and performance at the same time. When you gently cut across that flow, the structure weakens immediately. Picture a coworker confidently explaining a process. Then you casually ask what they were doing right before that decision. Watch how often the rhythm breaks. In personal relationships, someone narrates a clean timeline, and you ask about a detail just outside their prepared path. Suddenly they pause, repeat themselves, or restart. That moment is not nerves, it is overload. Truth adapts easily because it is not being managed. Real memory can move backward, sideways, and forward without effort. Lies cannot do that. They are linear. They require control. When you disrupt that control, cracks appear. You are not accusing anyone. You are not interrogating. You are changing the mental task without announcing it. Most people miss this because they wait politely until the story ends. By then, the liar has landed safely and control is restored. Cognitive overload works because it happens mid-flow, when the brain is already stretched thin. The response tells you more than the content itself. Honest people adjust and continue without stress. Liars stumble, fill space with extra words, or abandon the thread entirely. That reaction is information. This step is powerful because it feels natural. Conversations interrupt themselves all the time in real life. You are simply choosing when to step in. Truth adapts, lies collapse. Once you see this pattern, smooth delivery stops impressing you. You start watching how well a story survives disruption. This prepares you for the next step, where correction reveals intention. Because after collapse, the way someone handles being wrong shows whether honesty was present or only performed under pressure. Especially when consequences begin forming publicly everywhere around everyone involved now there. Step 7 shows how to test honesty without accusation, pressure, or drama. And it works because truth corrects itself. This is called the correction test. You casually introduce a small, incorrect detail and watch what happens next. Someone telling the truth reacts instantly. They fix it without thinking because accuracy matters more than agreement. Someone lying often lets the error slide, nods along, or builds on it, because correcting you risks collapsing the entire story. Think about a friend describing where they were and you casually mention the wrong location. An honest person immediately says, "No, that was somewhere else." A liar often accepts it and keeps going. In work situations, you repeat a detail slightly wrong about a meeting or decision. Truth pushes back. Deception adapts. In sales, this happens when you misstate a feature or condition. A truthful seller corrects you quickly. A deceptive one agrees to keep momentum. This is not manipulation. It is observation. You are not accusing anyone of lying. You are watching what they value more in that moment, accuracy or comfort. Honest people protect facts automatically. Liars protect flow. That difference is subtle but decisive. Most people miss it because they assume agreement means clarity. Often it means avoidance. Correction feels risky to liars because it forces them to engage with reality instead of performance. This is why the correction test works best when you stay calm and neutral. No challenge, no tone change, just a small error and silence. The response gives you everything. Honesty corrects automatically. Once you notice this pattern, when conversations become clearer without conflict, you stop chasing explanations and start observing reactions. Comment. This explains a lot. This final step completes the process, because after pressure, disruption, and time, how someone handles being wrong tells you whether truth was present all along or only rehearsed to survive attention. This awareness protects you quietly, because it shifts power away from performance and back to reality, saving you from arguments, confusion, delayed regret, public embarrassment, wasted time, broken trust, financial loss, emotional fallout, and explanations that arrive after damage is permanent. Awareness does not mean suspicion, and learning how to see clearly does not turn you cold. Paranoia looks for enemies everywhere. Awareness looks for patterns and waits. The difference matters because the goal is not to distrust everyone, but to stop trusting blindly. You do not need to interrogate people, test everyone you love, or walk through life armored. You only need to slow down. When you slow down, words stop hypnotizing you and behavior starts speaking. Promises lose their shine. patterns gain weight. Think about how often someone said all the right things, yet nothing ever changed. You were not wrong for believing. You were early. Awareness teaches you to give trust in stages, not all at once. It teaches you to watch how people respond to time, pressure, and accountability. Someone who is honest stays stable across moments. Someone who is deceptive adapts constantly. This is not cynicism. It is calibration. You are not assuming bad intent. You are observing consistency. That single shift protects relationships instead of poisoning them, because it prevents resentment from building quietly behind forced optimism. When you trust patterns, conversations feel lighter, not heavier. You stop arguing. You stop chasing clarity from people who avoid it. You stop explaining yourself to performances. Instead, you notice who follows through, who corrects themselves, who stays grounded when nothing is gained by pretending. This awareness does not make you bitter. It gives you self-respect. It tells you your time matters, your money matters, your attention matters. Machiavellian awareness is not about manipulation. It is about refusing to be manipulated by politeness, charm, or hope. It is choosing reality over comfort before reality forces the lesson painfully later. When you live this way, you trust again. But you trust intelligently. You trust behavior, not reassurance. You trust repetition, not speeches. Awareness isn't bitterness. It's self-respect. That mindset keeps you open without being exposed, calm without being passive, and confident without becoming arrogant. It allows you to care deeply while staying grounded, to listen fully without surrendering judgment, and to move through relationships with clarity instead of fear. Because seeing clearly does not destroy trust. It simply makes it earned through time, pressure, and real-world consequences. Comment "I trust" patterns, not promises. Subscribe if you want to understand people without being used, without becoming cynical, and without losing your humanity while protecting what matters most.